Welcome back to the next episode of the Dental Marketing Secrets Podcast, episode 111, Why Patients Say Yes, Part 3 on Social Proof. My name is Mark Thackeray. Excited to have you here with me today, however you may be listening. Thanks for joining in. And we're continuing our discussion on this book, The Psychology of Persuasion. It's called Influence by Dr. Robert Cialdini. Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion. Really what makes people tick. You know, what makes people want to say yes to whatever you're proposing. And it's so fascinating because there's so many different reasons, right? And this is what makes marketing so much fun, in my opinion, is because it's applied psychology. We're really looking at what drives decisions, you know, from a patient perspective. And today we're going to be talking about this concept of social proof. And this one is probably the most accepted, I would say, the most understood, just because we see it. It's so pervasive in our society today. When we're looking at reviews is a great example of social proof and how so many people look at those before they ever make a decision. You know, I mean, there's so many statistics. I pulled up a few. 71% of patients use reviews to evaluate and select a provider. 3 out of 4 people say reviews are extremely or very important when choosing a healthcare provider, and reviews influence 88% of patients in discovering a local practice. So, and really it makes so much sense, you know, when you're looking around for a recommendation, then you go to reviews. Like, it's an easy way to do research because you can see what people have said, multiple different people have said, all in one place. You don't have to pick up the phone and call and talk to each one individually. You don't have to track down individual websites and do your due diligence that way. It's all right there. And so reviews are a really good way to do that. It's a great example of what we're going to be talking about today. But really, I think to set the stage, it's important to realize why people tend to look sideways before they look forward. And when I say look sideways, I mean they look at what their peers are doing to get an understanding of what they should likely be doing. And this really happens a lot when we don't feel sure of ourselves, right? When we're in a new situation, oftentimes we'll take cues from other people around us in that situation. Here's an example. So yesterday, I put together a dental networking group, and just to facilitate relationships within the industry. It was our first meeting. And it's fun to watch what people do when they come in. Some already have, you know, they already have a clear understanding of, they've been part of a networking group before. They know how to do this. They know how to approach people and, you know, introduce themselves. They're very comfortable doing that. And others, not so much, right? In fact, someone even commented on that. He said, it's fun to watch people like kind of go towards someone and shake hands, not sure how to, you know, if they should talk for very long or not. And so they look to each other for these visual cues and how to act. And I think that's really what we're talking about here. And this happens all the time when it comes to patients in the dental industry, because patients are not dental experts. They're not, you know, I mean, it's funny and maybe a little embarrassing that it took me so many years in the industry to fully understand all the different parts of a dental implant. You know, you've got the implant itself, the abutment, the crown, all those things. I just, you know, I never, you know, when I first learned that, I thought, man, all these years, I thought I had an idea of what that required and all that went into that, but I didn't. You know, there were so many things that I didn't quite understand yet. And patients are very much the same, where they're looking to you for, obviously, for recommendations and guidance, because they don't have that extensive knowledge or understanding of the mouth and how it operates. But they're also looking to their peers, you know, and this is one of the reasons why referrals are so powerful, is because it removes a lot of that due diligence that's required on their part to figure out if this is a good practice, if this is a good provider for me, right? It allows them to just not have to worry about that and just trust the recommendation of a family member, of a friend. And they don't now have to go compare and contrast all these different websites. They don't have to go visit an office or call on the phone. It removes all of that out of the equation. And now they have a simple solution. Of course, that would be, that's a comforting thought, right? To not have to do any of that work and trust someone who's already been through that experience, right? So it makes sense that the social proof is is one of these influencers, one of these factors of why people say yes, is because it does. And I think that's part of it, is so much of it is that it removes the obligation on their part to do all the work involved with finding out if you're the right practice for them or not. They want to know that you've seen other people like them, that they're not the only one that you've seen, and that they can trust you because of that. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how we can do that in our practices more effectively, and we'll share some examples from the book as well, just in everyday life. I mentioned the one at the networking group, but there's so many other ways that we do this, as humans. And hopefully you'll have some takeaways too from this to go and act on to make to enhance your social proof. We all know about reviews, but we're going to dive into how to make those more effective to your patients here in just a little bit. But again, I think it's important to, as always, when we're talking about these principles of influence, to use them properly and ethically. We don't want to do this to try and strong arm people or trick them into treatment that they don't want. It's really, I include this disclosure essentially to remind people that this is just, we want to be, as far as ethics go, we want to be at the top of the list. We want to be advocates of our patients. And you've heard me say that many times on this podcast, to really fall in love with your patients to the point where you're thinking of their best interest, and they can feel that and they can see that by your actions. And so that's the place that I'm coming from with this. And I'm just so intensely curious about how this works. I've loved this book. I've read it multiple times, and I'm still picking out different things and different applications. But I think it's just it's a fascinating way to look at how our minds operate when it comes to decisions. So that's a little bit of background there. I've mentioned that before, but if you're just tuning in for the first time, again, we want to use this responsibly. So what does social proof mean, right? I mean, and this again is kind of reiterating what I said initially, but when people are unsure, they look to others for those cues. And if there's enough people doing it, we automatically assume that behavior is correct, because it's just, we generally have this feeling that if there's that many people doing it, then it's probably right, or it's probably okay, is maybe a better way to put that. And when I mentioned that, I just immediately thought of driving on the freeway. And wherever you drive, Utah is, we're known for being bad drivers. And there's really bad drivers. I've driven all across the country. There's bad drivers everywhere. But yeah, also here in Utah. But it's interesting how much this comes into play when you're on the road. You're on the freeway and you're driving, and let's say, typical speed limit, 65, 70 some places. But more often than not, people are going 75, 80, no problem. That's just, they've got places to be, places to go, time is money kind of attitude. Or they just like driving fast. Also me sometimes. But we feel like, hey, everyone else is doing it, then that's okay. And what's interesting is that they've kind of made that okay in the law enforcement, right? The way patrol, it's really, what's the flow of traffic look like? You don't want to be someone who's going 60 when people are zooming past at 80, because that could cause some issues. So you can go with the flow of traffic and be relatively protected from law enforcement for that, even if you're going above the speed limit. So that's a great example of how we look at this, the cues of others, this social proof in practice, and how it affects our decision-making and our actions. But the more we see that, the more we think it's acceptable, and the more those people are similar to us, the stronger the effect that has. And again, you go back to the idea of referrals, and that's why if you can match up referral types, I mean, that's why really you see people will tend to refer the same type of person that they are or similar type of person that they are. So if they are, let's say I'm a busy mom with multiple kids, chances are they're spending their time with other busy moms with multiple kids. And so your referrals are going to be those other busy moms with multiple kids. It's just how it plays out more often than not. And so that's a interesting thing to look at, to think of when you're going through social proof. A few other examples from kind of everyday life, just to really drive this home, is you look at, let's say you're walking downtown, and this has happened to my wife and I multiple times, where we're choosing a restaurant, and sometimes we'll just walk if we're especially in a new city or someplace that we're not familiar with. Just like to walk it, and just walk around, see what our options are, and then we'll double back if we feel good about one, over another. And it's amazing how often we look at how busy the restaurant is. If we pass one that has a lot of people in there versus one that maybe there's one or two, it has a different impact. It lands differently based on how many people are there. Sorry, I just spit into my mic. The number of people there influences how we view that restaurant. We may not have been to either one, but it automatically creates a perception in our head of, hey, one is likely the better choice because there's people there. And it doesn't make sense, right? I mean, it doesn't say that, it doesn't mean that it is better. It's just that there are more people there. Maybe they had an amazing special or something that drove all these people there, or they're giving it away for free or anything like that. And we don't know that, but it just automatically, we assume that one is superior to the other. And again, we do this all the time with reviews is an easy example. You can see one practice that has 670 reviews versus one who has 14. It's a pretty easy decision. Assuming all things are equal and all other things are equal, you're likely going to go with the one with more reviews, right? Just because we associate quality, we associate superiority with quantity a lot of times. So how can we take this and really apply this? Okay, we know, I wanted to share a few others from the book too, just again to really kind of drive this home. But they did. So oftentimes in an audience, in a live production, it could be a stand-up or it could be a TV, sitcom, or, maybe not a sitcom, I guess. But if you're watching a comedian, for example, a lot of times they'll what they call salt the audience with people that are laughers, or they'll even have, for a show, they'll have laughter tracks, so that it increases the idea that, hey, there's a lot of people that are finding this funny. I should too. They've actually proven that it generates more laughs when they either have a laughing track or they have these people planted in the audience with very loud, boisterous laughs, and we've all seen that too. I mean, sometimes you're with your friends or with other people and someone is just, they are laughing so hard, tears are streaming down their face, or they're just, they're incessantly laughing, and you can't help but laugh yourself. You don't even know what there's nothing that you don't know what it's about at all. But the fact that they're laughing makes you want to laugh. And it's just another one of those situations where we take those cues from other people. They did another one he shared in the book was from a hotel that was trying to get their guests not to to hang up their towels, I should say. I think ultimately their desire was that they wanted them to dry them themselves so they wouldn't have to wash so much, didn't have to spend so much on cleaning the towels and things like that. So what they did, they actually put together they tried a few different experiments, and the most successful one was a little placard, a little card that said something to the effect of 87%, they gave a statistic, I can't remember off the top of my head what it was, but a high percentage of guests hung their own towels for a cleaner environment or something along those lines, to be more eco-friendly. to use less in detergents and to be more eco-friendly, something along those lines. And it proved that it dropped their towel washing and the detergent, the amount of detergent they had to use to keep those towels clean was dropped significantly because people were influenced by this little sign. They were influenced by the behavior of other people that they'd chosen to, in an attempt to be more eco-friendly, hang up their own towels, and thus did not require their towels to be laundered every single day. And it's a great example of how effective this can be. Is, other people like you have done this, so the implication is that you probably should too. And again, I want to stress that we're not trying to do this in our practice where we're forcing or guilting or anything like that to do certain treatment. This is more just sharing, just understanding how this affects us, right? So we again want to be very tactful about how we do this, very ethical about how we do this, but it is fascinating how much of an effect this has on our decision making. And I think some of the areas where we tend to miss the mark is, I think a lot of practices are doing a good job. I should say, first off, a lot of practices are doing a great job of using some of those reviews on their website, on social media. I see them post them on Instagram quite often, which is great. Sometimes on Google Business Profile posts and in pictures, very smart. And sometimes even in office, they'll create, we did this with our clients, is we'll create posters around, their culture or their practice culture, or what we call their brand distinction, what makes them different as a practice, and align some of their values with those and use specific patient testimonials to support those values and show what they look like in action. And that could be a great way to reinforce the value itself, but also to use that social proof to help others see and recognize how different you are as a practice. But where some of the practices tend to fall short is they don't always provide great context with those reviews. And quite frankly, there's a lot of reviews that are very, very generic. They're very vanilla. They don't have many specifics. And so it's not, and they're not as effective because they lack that specificity. They don't provide as much context as they probably could have, right? If someone has a child that is flat out refused to go to the dentist for over a year, reads a review of another parent who went to this, had this similar situation, and through the help of the practice, the dentist, the hygienist, the staff made it very comfortable, removed that fear, and now they go to the dentist regularly. That's going to have a lot more impact than someone who says something generic like, "This is highly recommend this practice. They were great." That's not going to have the same influence as one with a similar context that they find themselves in. Okay, so it's getting these reviews. One, that's step number one. And a lot of practices, like I said, are doing a good job of this. We realize the value of reviews. Step two is being intentional on those reviews. Can we get more specific reviews? So how do we frame those questions to encourage our patients to share those details? And then three, can we be strategic about how we use those reviews, how we share those reviews? Can we put them on our website in strategic locations? Can we align reviews that match up with dental implants or match up with Invisalign? Find specific reviews that speak to that experience that the patient had with that treatment, and put those on that specific page. That's going to do a much better job than just the generic reviews. Yes, generic reviews are better than nothing, absolutely. But we can take the time to categorize some of those reviews, and then select where they would fit best, right? So that right there is a great action item for your practice, is to start keeping track. This can be something simple. What we do for our clients is we create a Google sheet and we just add reviews on there, and we have different categories. Just put it under the category that it fits best. If it applies to multiple categories, copy and paste it under both categories or multiple categories. But now you have a resource that you can go back to anytime you need it and pick out a testimonial or a patient review that's specific to what you're looking for. It is so helpful, and it's not very hard to do. It is not very hard to do. And then you can take that and apply that in so many different ways. On the website, social media, in office, there's so many things, right? The next thing, kind of the next level, is to really create the story around that review. Stories are even more persuasive than just a simple review because patients see themselves in stories. And I've talked about stories, using stories quite a bit on this podcast. So you can go back through those episodes and listen to those. But stories are very, very compelling. As soon as someone starts a story, our ears perk up. We are usually tuned in. You see this all the time in groups. I church every Sunday, and I love to watch people speak because it's so funny. I love to watch how people react to the person speaking. And when they use stories, more often than not, people will look up and look actually at the speaker while they're talking. They're just more engaged than when they're not using a story. And so story can be a very powerful persuasion tool to help patients see this treatment as an option, for example. You can share the experience of a patient that was in a similar situation, share some of the deep details to really create a story instead of just a log of what happened. So share, and when I say details, I think of how did they feel beforehand? What prompted them to come in and get treatment or to accept treatment? What were they hoping would happen? And then what did happen? Really create a visual, or not a visual, you could do a visual too, but more of a verbal before and after, a contrast between how they were before and how the transformation that occurred afterwards. And share that story so that patients can see and feel themselves in that story, because they're going to recognize a lot of those same feelings that you include in that. They weren't sure. This patient wasn't confident about their smile. They tend to shy away in public settings. They got passed over for a promotion and they felt like it was because they weren't outgoing enough and they felt held back by the way their smile looked. You fill in those details because you have those, right? Those are real. You know those patients and you know their story. And that is a fantastic thing to share, because then it helps the patient understand this could be what my life becomes. This could be my reality. Oftentimes they don't get that. They get the treatment recommendation, but they don't get the validation that comes with someone who understands the plight that they're in, who recognizes the feelings and challenges they're going through, and has a solution for them. That's the power of stories. And those come with patient reviews. Those come with seeing patients and making note of those, right? So I always consult my clients. I encourage them to use stories whenever possible. It's a great thing to share stories about patients. Obviously, you want to be compliant with HIPAA regulations and not share any of that those personal identifiers. But I also think stories as it relates to what makes you different. How did you get into dentistry, into the practice? What gets you excited to wake up every day? Those are the things that patients want to hear. They want to be with someone who wants to be there, who loves to see people and treat them and help them. They don't want some dude that's some clown that's just there to clock in and clock out and doesn't want to talk to people, that has a weird bedside manner. I just talked to a couple of docs who has another doctor in one of their other offices, terrible bedside manner. And they're frustrated because patients don't want to see them. They have all these options. They don't have to go back. And when you realize that, it makes it easier a little bit, I think, or not maybe easier, but you realize the importance of the experience you deliver. And again, stories play a big part in that. And that's because of the social proof aspect. Okay, so Look at how you can keep track of your reviews to categorize those, how you can do a better job of asking for reviews with context, things that they were afraid of before, and how that got resolved. So fear, anxiety, those are always two huge ones. Busy schedules, convenience, long delays before treatment, cosmetic, anything cosmetic that relates to confidence and self-esteem, families, kids. There's so many different things. But encourage your patients to be specific when they leave a review, and then keep a couple of those patient stories handy in your back pocket, ready to use, ready to share. Those make for great video content on your website or on social media, or to share in office with a patient, because they need it. It really helps them to see the before and after. It helps them to feel comfortable that other people have had a similar experience, that they're not alone. First off, helps normalize that, because it's very common. And it helps them feel like they're not, like they're not unique in that. Because sometimes if we feel like we're unique, then we don't feel like there's probably a solution out there, because we're too unique. Oh, I hear this all the time. My practice is different. I'm like, I know it is, but it's not. It operates on the same principles that every other practice is. I get that you feel like it's different for different ways, and that's true. But in the ways of what we're talking about, it's not. And that's very similar to patients. The principles, the context might be a little different. They might have unique details, but the principles are the same. So look for those things. And those are some great examples of things that you can do to elevate the social proof and really provide a better experience to patients. Okay. And that'll help you even think about, how do you change your language with patients? Things like I said, you want to normalize the fact that a lot of people feel this way, and something you can say with them: hey, you are not alone. We see that dozens of times every week. Honestly, it's very, very common. And then things like, a lot of our patients, or most patients in this situation, look at it this way. You're just presenting what a lot of people are doing, because again, that helps them see and be truthful. You're not trying to slant this information in your favor. Again, this is all assuming that you are trying to be an advocate, a true advocate to your patients. You're trying to provide them with the best possible solutions available, but helping them to see that, hey, this is normal for a lot of people, and these options, they're looking at these things, so it helps them. It's another great way to put it. It's like, people in this situation, a lot of our patients look at these three things and view them as the most important, and just help them to really focus in on those things that matter most when making that decision, that this is going to impact your life positively, for the rest of your life, every single day after. They look at all the times, an example could be something along the lines of, they've looked at all the times in the past where they've shied away from an opportunity. And now they feel done with that. They are done with that. They want to look forward, knowing that every day they can be and act and feel like a different person, like a new person. And again, you're just trying to help them see that and then allow them to make the choice on their own. So those are some great ideas for you. Those are things that I'm seeing a lot of as far as opportunities. And just an emphasis again, you want to make sure that we're doing this in the proper way. Don't fabricate any of this stuff. You've got all the great stories. You're dealing with hundreds, oftentimes thousands of patients. You have great stories to share. So just use one of those. You don't need to come up with your own. Just use one of them and ask them questions. If you don't have all the details, ask them. Talk to your patients about it. Just say, you know what, I was thinking about you the other day and about your transformation and how far you've come. It's amazing. Can I ask, what prompted you to seek out treatment in the first place? Like, what was it that really helped you decide to take action when you did? Just be curious. You're going to get some great answers. and it'll help improve the story and make it even better for you. You know, you have a better story for you and more motivation for you and your team, which is awesome. Okay, that's it for today, my friends. Thanks for tuning in to this series on influence. We'll be back next week. In the meantime, if you would like to improve social proof for this podcast, and I encourage you to do so because that would just make me so happy, then please leave a review wherever you're listening to this. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, however, again, wherever you are listening, please leave us a review. And that would be fantastic and make me so giddy. And until next time, my friends, be good. We'll talk to you next week.